If you want to know what sports PTs overlook when working with barbell athletes, you have to tune into this episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Welcome all new listeners, and welcome back to those who have heard my content in the past. If you want to know what sports PTs overlook when working with barbell athletes, you have to tune into this episode. All right, before I get onto the podcast, what is new with life? What is better or upgraded since the last podcast? If you know me, if you've been on my podcast for a while, you know there's always chaos, good chaos, always good things happening. First, I always start with my kids. My son Zach is officially out of like not child. Uh, like toddler or like kid shoes. He's into like the big kid shoes. So I shed a tear this morning when I saw him with his brand new size one shoes. That was pretty amazing. My daughter Alex is getting a little sassier, excuse me, sassier, and YouTube and a couple maybe friends and TV shows have added to her language. So I'm managing that on the back end. What is new with my wife? Everything is good. We're just literally mapping out what the next 6 months to 1 year looks like with our family and everything that we're doing. Personally, what's different with me? I share this with my team. If you ask me, hey, what's the your current project you're working on right now? It would be learning how to manage incomplete buckets. What I mean by that is maybe in life, if you're OCD type A, just like me, you like to close doors. You open them, and maybe you're applying to a certain job, and you submit the application. You like to know that everything is done. Maybe you're applying to PT school, and you submitted applications, and you paid all the dues and everything else, and the application's done. And I call that a bucket. It's a task, right? And with all the chaos that I'm in and that I put myself in, sometimes you have to be okay with incomplete buckets, meaning sometimes that door won't close right behind that bucket for weeks to months to years. And as a physical therapist who's type A OCD, they love to do the best. They want to be the best. We like to close doors. We like to know that everything is good and smooth. And so as a business owner at Sports Performance, and now with the Chris Garcia Academy, there's always doors, there's always things happening, and they never seem to get closed. And so, just managing that and learning how to cope with that. That's my current process, and that is real. No matter where you are in your career, maybe you're a new grad and you have this new job opening, you're paying student loans, you have all these, things that you're juggling, and it's frustrating that you can't like seal the deal or close the door with certain things, and that's very normal. I don't think it actually gets any easier. Actually gets more challenging as you add more and more things into your life. Maybe you're doing a residency, maybe you have kids, maybe you have a whatever that is, and that's very normal. So yeah, if you're struggling with that, I'm right there with you. Uh, well, I just had our 8th year anniversary party at Sports Performance, and I know I mentioned in the last podcast, but amazing. I told my team that wherever you are as a physical therapist, you ultimately want to feel good about what you're doing. And to me, when I started my career, I knew that I wanted to make an impact, like locally with the patients and athletes that I serve. I like that's just part of the job. But then as I started to see like what my greater vision, like what I wanted to do to as a physical therapist in my community was impact my community. And so we created the our anniversary party, Fit Fest, to be able to give back to our community, and that was great. I got to see people I hadn't seen in years, and our this ecosystem, this thing that we're doing in Chula Vista, San Diego, is getting bigger, and I'm really, really excited. And I'm excited to spread that with more and more PTs around the country. So we hosted Fit Fest. I just hosted the Barbell webinar For those who want to learn how to manage barbell athletes, I just hosted a 2-hour webinar that was fantastic. We had a ton of attendees, and the big thing I learned from that is sometimes you have to just simplify the thing. You don't want to make things complex for your barbell athletes. Simple is better, and they just want to be treated just like everybody else. I have the barbell athlete management of the barbell athlete CEU course this weekend, so I'm fired up. I'm excited about that. I'm excited to see everybody there. I have some special guests that I'm going to surprise everybody with, so I'm excited to see your guys' reaction. That's about it. All right, let's go into this podcast. So, what do sports PTs overlook when working with barbell athletes? Now, I decided to go with sharing with what you guys overlook. I think it's important because if you've heard my podcast on yellow, red, and green lights, I know that if you give too many green lights, there's just more and more questions. If you give red lights, it makes it easy. You can't do this, don't do this. And with barbell athletes, what are the 3 things that PTs overlook? It's actually very, very basic, very, very simple, and it might surprise you. The first one, you ready for this? Most clinicians will look at the hips, the ankles, the shoulders, the low back, all these other things. You know what they overlook typically? The wrist and the elbow. Now, why is that important? Let me tell you an interesting story. A few years ago, when I started with barbell mechanics and barbell activities, CrossFit, functional fitness, Olympic lifting, I started in 2014. My wife got me to drink the juice. She did, and I didn't want to do CrossFit. I loved Olympic lifting, and I met a coach named Pierce, and I remember Pierce complaining about some right-sided shoulder pain, and we would work on stuff, lat length and rotator cuff, scapular mechanics, thoracic mobility, core work, rib breathing, neck range of motion. I mean, you name it, and mechanically programming, you name it. And I would always get frustrated. Like, he was a very smart, proactive individual. And I'm like, why can't we fix this shoulder pain? And we kind of backed him down. We modified his movements, everything else. And one day I finished a workout and I saw him working out, and I noticed something strange. And I said, hey, why is the barbell kind of slightly tilted? And he had his barbell overhead. So maybe imagine doing like a strict shoulder press in standing. And he had the barbell at the very top. And I remember the barbell had a canter of about 15, 20 degrees, noticeable difference. And I looked at him and I said, hey, why is the barbell uneven like that? The weight was the same. And when you press, it looks like it's kind of uneven. He said, I don't know. Let me take a look. So we videoed it. And it was the left side was higher and the right side was lower. And the right side was the lower, was the same shoulder area that had pain. And I went into a quick analysis, and this is me after working with him for weeks to months, even a year. I remember thinking, why have I never seen that? And he said, oh, I know why. I said, why? He goes, I fractured my wrist, 10, 20 years ago. But I mean, that's not really important because it's my right side shoulder. And I said, wait a minute, Pierce, your left wrist is the reason why you have right shoulder pain. He said, that doesn't even make sense to me. He didn't have wrist extension. So the barbell was always in a neutral grip, which means that he couldn't bend it backwards, whether that was a snatch or a clean and jerk. So he had to always have a neutral grip. Well, that side always had a higher shoulder position, and the one that had normal range of motion sat lower. And then I started thinking, wait a minute, what have I been missing? Now you have to acknowledge that you make mistakes along the way, and that was a big one. I missed this one. This is early on in my career working with barbell athletes and CrossFitters. And I realized, wait a minute, I need to check wrist range of motion. Why? Because these individuals, when they're in a full snatch, an overhead squat, or a clean and jerk, they need full wrist extension. And if they don't have that, well, you're missing out on a large piece that might be explaining the story. Now, Pierce is a very small example, but very critical to the like actual full depth analysis. And now, so every CrossFitter that comes in or barbell athlete comes in, I'm like, let me see your wrist, let me see your wrist. I want to make sure that it's cleared. And that's kind of like I equate that to the equivalent of doing reflexes on somebody who has low back pain or sciatica or herniated disc. Why do you check the reflexes? So you don't miss anything. So why would you check wrist range of motion on somebody who has shoulder pain, neck pain, knee pain, hip pain? So I don't miss anything. That's now like my version. I'm like, oh, let me see it. And so what's my favorite, test? Honestly, the prayer position, like with hands close to the chest and hands together and then elbows up. And so I like to see where that wrist comes together. And so wrist is one, and then the elbow. This is also something I've noticed with somebody. This one was a mistake of mine as well. Somebody who had an elbow injury, I don't know, years ago, and they didn't have full flexion. And what that did was it limited their ability to carry a barbell in a front rack position. So in a clean. So when somebody lands in a full clean position, they need full elbow flexion with max wrist extension. If they don't have full elbow flexion, they won't be able to catch that clean. They'll probably stick with power cleans. And I'm telling you this because the more and more CrossFitters and more barbell athletes I worked with, I realized that everybody has a story. These are community members. Maybe they're pros, maybe they're elite, maybe whatever it is. Everyone has a story. And as a clinician, you fail to realize that sometimes. And I did. I messed up. I'm telling you, don't mess this up, because if you're a new grad or you've now started working with barbell athletes, this is a clinical pearl you need to be adding in. Look at full elbow flexion and look at full wrist extension. If you don't have those two, you will have this cascade of events that will continue to just follow them into pain, and you literally will be the clinician who figured it out for them. I'm telling you, I'm sure these people probably went and saw other PTs or massage therapists or other healthcare providers, and maybe they figured it out, or maybe it took a long time and I was the one. Either way, I'm telling you, wrist and elbow range of motion needs to be part of your examination right from the get-go. That way you can clear it out of the way and you don't miss a thing, kind of like your reflexes. So that to me is the reflexes with a barbell athlete. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, all right, I mentioned this on my last podcast or a podcast about barbell athletes, but considering external bracing for long-term support. Now, I think as a profession, we we think of external bracing as like kind of like modalities. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe people use that. I don't no way I would ever use a brace. No knee sleeves, no nothing, no wrist wraps. You should do it raw. You should be able to do it with your body weight and everything else. And that might work for certain people, but the reality is that when you are under a load for 4 to 5 days a week, 50 to 52 weeks a year, your body takes a beating. So the more and more I've worked with Olympic lifters and CrossFitters and barbell athletes, the more I've realized they're not doing it to solve a problem. They're doing it for the support. I now wear knee sleeves just for the warmth. I have patients and athletes that I've worked with that I've recommended elbow sleeves just because they've had elbow issues in the past and they purely want the kinesthetic kind of awareness. And it's not that they have pain. Now, there's always a balance. Now, sometimes you have people who wear like the wrist wraps and the elbow sleeves and the knee sleeves and the lifters and the scrunchie and the headband and the whatever, you name it. And don't think of it as, I think as clinicians, when we work in a model where we see the same people, all day, every day, and you see a barbell athlete coming into your office, you're like, oh, I'm going to apply the same principles. And these people want to be treated just the way that you would with any other athlete. However, there are some prerequisites within their sport that might require them to have external bracing, but for no other reason that they enjoy it or they're under a load for a long period of time. So for instance, a weight belt. I promote using a weight belt above 85%, meaning whenever 85% of their one rep max approaches, I'm a big fan of that that belt. Why? Because they still want to be able to train 3 to 5 days after that, or they want to train all month long. And why risk having a back injury or a hip injury or something that irritates them, that blocks them or prevents them from training the rest of the week or month? Now, I think that would be hypocritical of us, because us as physical therapists, we also appreciate being able to exercise all year long for life. And if you are saying no to a weight belt, that's purely out of principle, only because you're the position of power telling somebody to say no, when in reality, you would probably use that. Why? Because you're like, well, I want to be able to train next week. I want to be able to I want to be able to walk tomorrow. I want to be able to work. And these people do the same. And so I think you have to flip that. So my first point was that you need to look at wrist and elbow range of motion / mobility. Number two, I think you need to reconsider using external bracing as a long-term support, not just getting out of pain or reliant on anything. It's just long-term support, and it's just part of their sport. So, what is number three? This is probably the thing that I've seen after mentoring thousands of sports physical therapists. What's the thing that they overlook the most? That they expect a barbell athlete to get out of pain quickly, or that they're going to work some magic and they're like so proud to like, oh, I got him better in 3 visits and they never have to come back. The reality with the barbell athlete is that when you're working up to loads of 90, 93, 95, and sometimes 100% of max effort, whatever they can sustain, you also have to realize that if they're doing that repetitively, their body is undergoing stress that will sometimes negatively affect them, meaning they're going to have aches and pains and maybe even pain that limits them from performing a lift the next week, that day, the next day. And I think PTs need to reconsider the term pain-free. I think that whenever you're working with a barbell athlete, if you truly understand their sport, they're going to have constant aches and pains. And so instead of saying, well, I'm going to get you pain-free, consider the thought process of, I'm going to help you manage this current injury. And I know things are going to pop up in 3 to 6 months with your shoulder, your knee, your neck, your back, whatever it is, because of the nature of your sport. So anytime you work with a barbell athlete, consider them a long-term or a year-long or a lifetime patient or athlete. Oh, that's so hard for us as a profession. How dare you say lifetime? Why would you want to bring them back? Because they train so hard. You ever worked with a triathlete or a marathoner? You really think that they're never going to have pain again? You solve their Achilles issue? Really? What about their left knee? What about their right hip? And as they age, do you really think that they're going to be able to maintain the same stress over time across a decade? False. Olympic lifters, they have less of a repetitive like distance challenge. They just have a high load over a small duration. So they will have peaks and valleys. Why? Because they compete. The more elite you are, the less you compete, but you might have people competing 2 to 3 times a year. So you know there might be a seasonality to treating the athletes and patients of, that are barbell athletes. And you have to just be okay with that. As a professional, my gosh, I've met so many established clinicians and new grads who say, well, I thought I got them better. Well, you didn't get them better. I got them better. They came back because you didn't solve their problem, or your back pain just isn't getting better. So I'm gonna send you to the orthopedic surgeon for consult. You need an MRI. You just every 3 months, every 6 months, your back just seems to flare up. How about because they're competing and that's their seasonality of their sport? It's not that they have repetitive injuries, it's the same injury that tends to pop up when they go above 90%. So why treat it like you can't solve it? Maybe it will never get solved, and maybe their pain will just be a constant challenge they have, but they choose to do that because they chose the sport. And sometimes you have to understand that as a clinician, Maybe you won't solve everybody's problem. Now, I might have ruined your day as a type A OCD clinician who wants to solve every problem, close all the doors, and have patients and athletes who may or may not have a 100% pain-free lifestyle. That bothers you. That bothers clinicians. That's a normal thing. Believe me, I did the first few years. I fought it. I fought it. I fought it. I fought it. I'm like, I'm gonna get you pain-free. I'm gonna solve everything. And then I realized they're just time under tension. They just have a constant load being applied, constant stress, and maybe they might not be pain-free, but I'm gonna keep them in their sport. And you have to just maybe consider them as a long-term management versus a short-term fix. There's a big difference there. A short-term fix means you fix them. A long-term management means you can manage them for a long period of time. You may not fix them 100%, but you can manage them. I think if you said to me, Chris, I can help you across the year and I can manage anything that pops up, but I can keep you 90% the whole time, or I can have you go through 0 and 90%, 0 and 90%, 0 and 90%. I don't want those large gaps. I want to be able to just train all year long at a certain percentage and feel confident that somebody can help me. So start to consider that you can help somebody across a lifespan, a year span, and stop thinking that you can fix them or get them pain free. Oof. That might hurt a couple of you because you're like, wait a minute, PT school said this, the APTA says this, my CI said this, my director said this. I'm just exposing you to the pro sports. If you want to be a real sports physical therapist, you need to start considering other views and alternatives to what you currently know. You only know what you know, and ignorance is bliss. But once you're exposed to high level athletes, you never go back to the old way of thinking of pain free and fix and blah, 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 and improve their quality of movement and get them pain free and blah, blah, blah. You start to realize these individuals are constantly painful. They're constantly in like repair mode, and there's a seasonality to their competitions. So that's when they start to increase their intensity, they increase their volume. That's when they become a challenge to manage. But the best sports PTs can prevent it by controlling that before they know the seasonality. And that's, I think, where the art of true sports PTs come in. Not just ones who get the initials or get the CSCS, but never really have managed elite level people or managed people across a full season, maybe just for 4 weeks or 6 weeks. I've been on 3 PT interviews over the last 6 months. And when I have established clinicians, new grads, tell me that they want more, they want to be able to learn, but the challenge is they're stuck because they haven't been exposed to this. I'm telling you right now, this is the way that things are managed in pro sports. And if you're looking for something different, you're like, I'm just tired of hearing the same old thing, pain-free, discharge, fix the problem, get them out in a shorter period of time. And you're like, I want to be able to have a bigger impact so that they don't have pain, that they don't have to come back and miss 6 weeks of their season. They don't have to miss that high school football game. This is the approach that you need to take. I promise you, I mentor people. I mentor sports physical therapists who are very, very successful. I've done it in the pros. This is a very simple thing that you can be adding in. And that's all I wanted to share. Truly, this is about what sport PTs overlook when working with barbell athletes. So number one, they overlook wrist and elbow range of motion or mobility. They don't consider external bracing for long-term support, and they don't consider long-term management of a patient or athlete. They're always trying to get that short-term fix, that OCD type A sports PT. I know you because I am you. So I wanted to share that. So wherever you are, I hope that helps. And if you're like, Chris, man, I love this stuff. This makes so much sense to me. I know I'm missing something. This is what my courses are all about. Wherever you are, if you're just starting with me, or if you've been listening to me forever, come take my management of the barbell course specifically for this topic. If you're into my other topics, great. I have other courses, but if you're like, hey, Chris, I want to be able to work with barbell athletes. I love this. I love barbell athletes. Or you're like, hey, I want to improve my own mechanics, or I want to improve the mechanics of my CrossFitters, my weightlifters, my Olympic lifters, my power lifters. The course is perfect for you. It'll give you the framework on, basic strength and conditioning principles, how to integrate it within programming, how to work with coaches, what it is that you're missing in your evaluation or your treatment to get them pain-free temporarily, or at the very least, keeping them in their sport. So I hope that helps wherever you are. I hope to see you at the Management of the Barbell Athlete event this weekend in San Diego or virtual. If not, I will see you guys on the next episode. Take care.